public budget conversation with county executive staff, our county council members, our budget director, and we'll have different invited guests over the coming months. We can't have informed conversations about the level of county services that people provide unless we have a vibrant discussion about how we're going to pay for them. And over the past few years, past 15 years, to be specific, our expenses have grown faster than our revenues in St. Louis County. We know that this level of spending is not sustainable. So to address our budget challenges, we have to consider all the options. And to understand all the options, we have to have more frequent discussions, and that's why we're here today. The collaboration between my office and the county council will keep these communication lines open, but it will also allow our members of the public to follow along, to understand the budget process, and to provide us some feedback. We know that our county residents want county government to provide services efficiently. They want us to be transparent about the decisions we're making. So with this meeting and subsequent budget meetings, our budget director, Paul Kreidler, will be our mediator and will help make sure that these conversations are meaningful and that the dialogue is about our priorities. And my priorities are public health and public safety. We need to make sure that those who need help the most are receiving services from county government. I'd like to take a minute here to just introduce the folks at the table, and then we'll talk a little bit. I know Councilwoman Webb wants to make some remarks, and we'll talk a little bit about our goals. Start here to my left.
Chris Grunauer, I'm the Budget Policy Coordinator to the St. Louis County Council. Dennis Hancock, I'm the County Councilman from the 3rd District.
Kelly Dunaway, the County Councilwoman for the 2nd District.
Shalonda Webb, Councilwoman for the 4th District and Chair of the St. Louis County Council.
Paul Kreidler, I'm the County Director of Performance Management and Budget.
Dylan Lenzen, the Performance Manager.
Chairwoman Webb, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you, Dr. Page. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you to your office and to your staff for working with us to be collaborative, as we've said, probably going to say a million more times, to work through the hard. I also want to thank my peers who've stepped up to the plate and willing to invest their time, talent, and resources to these discussions to ensure that this is not a checkbox activity, that we are thorough and we move the needle on providing excellent service with the budget restraints that we may have. And I want to thank Chris Howard, because this, unlike for some of us, he's been working with Paul for several years and bringing his input to this meeting as well. The importance of this meeting is to ensure, as County Executive Dr. Page mentioned, that his priorities are public safety and health. As we go through this working group and this process, my goal is that we be focused on truly working with the departments and ensuring that we look at the people, processes, and tools that we can find improvements, streamline, and even generate some revenue. But when it's all said and done, we had all of the stakeholders at the table. And so with that, I'm excited about this process. Thank you, Dr. Page, for joining us and allowing us to join you all as we work through to provide the best service possible to the residents of St. Louis County. Hopefully, this process will also ensure that not only we address today and what we're looking at today, but we will be able to transform the process for the future. That maybe we need to look at different alternatives on how we handle our budgeting for our county government. So I'm eager, I'm interested. I already warned everybody of my questions, but I'm excited to work with each and every one of you, sincerely. Thank you. Got to ask my colleagues if they would like to make a statement. Is that okay? Would you like to say anything? Would you like to say?
Just looking forward to getting the process started and coming to a fruitful conclusion.
Thank you, Dr. Page.
Well, the goals of my office, I'm sure we all share these, but the goals of my office be to keep our workforce intact. We've worked hard to attract people to work for St. Louis County. We want to make sure that we maintain that investment, and we need to work hard to keep them here with the county. We want to make sure that we have the revenues that we need to provide the programming and the services that our county residents need and they've come to expect. We want to make sure county government's inclusive, that our resources are distributed in an equitable manner to people who need the help the most. I want to determine what we can do over the next 24 months. We know this year we'll be taking a big bite at addressing our budget deficit. But there's a lot of work ahead of us, and we know that this could very easily take more than a year to get us where we need to be. Councilman Webb, want to add anything else?
I would just say, as Dr. Page said, we're going to be asking for the departments, the staff, my peers, and the public to give us some grace. This is new. I want us to be able to be flexible and adjust as needed and pivot as necessary, and to ensure that we provide, as he stated as well, the transparency. So this is our first time going through this. I don't think it's ever been a time in the county's history that we've done this activity or we've done these efforts. And so I'm just asking everybody to extend that grace. So as we are learning and transforming, that you will stay tuned and be patient. That's all.
Next item on our agenda is to talk about the organizational structure and future planning. And for that, I will turn this over to Chris Howard.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. In a first for St. Louis County, a collaboration between the County Executive's Office and County Council members, Council Chair Webb, Councilwoman Dunaway, and Councilman Hancock in establishing a work group concerning the budgeting process and review. This work group will conduct weekly meetings with county departments and offices to discuss the overall budgetary process, county programs, and the services provided to understand better how the county operates. This work group will further hold monthly public milestone meetings that will report out on the progress made through this collaborative effort and provide time to answer questions submitted to the public prior to the meeting dates. And as I said on the way up here, Mr. County Executive, I am quite excited to see this process move forward.
Great. So the next item on our agenda is we'll turn this over to Paul Kreidler, and he'll talk about the budget development calendar, which starts very early in the calendar year.
Thank you. Let's see if I can share. But we'll just talk through it for now. So as this group is doing its work, which is bigger picture and longer term in terms of being transformative in how we budget and what our services and programs look like, the core work of developing the nuts and bolts of the budget will continue at the same time. So I wanted to make sure that everyone understands what that process looks like. And in your packet, you have our current budget development calendar, which I'll just briefly summarize. And I think we really have three kind of chunks of activities. We are currently still finishing up the prior fiscal year. So fiscal year 22 will be spending for another 3 weeks. And we won't have final revenues until March to April because we're an accrual basis of accounting. So we earn revenues in the 12 months of calendar 22, but sometimes we don't get them for a month or two. So we'll pick those up and move those back to the prior year. So we're doing that work now, but our official 2024 development starts in March. And in March and April and May, I'd say that's our recap and revenue development time period. So we are looking to see what happened in the prior year. We are updating our estimates of revenues for the current year, so 2023. And then we're making new projections for revenues for 5 years, so 2024 through 2028. We finish that work up in May, and at that point, we take a look at our financial plan and we determine what instructions we're going to give our departments for the construction of their appropriation budgets, which is what the main part of what you all see in October. So April and May, recap and revenues. Then we move into June and July, which I would say is building our spending budget, our appropriations. So there, the departments will take the instructions we give them, and they'll then be working on what their appropriations need to look like in order to maintain their program service levels. That work is wrapping up on the department level in July, and then we then switch to the decision phase where we work through what the departments have recommended or suggested. we determine whether we have any issues or concerns with those. We are using that time to incorporate any of the directives of the administration. And we're finishing that up by the end of September when the budget gets turned over to the council and your process begins, which, as you know, requires a charter required public hearing and whatever committee hearings you'd like. And then the council can take action with or without amendment, hopefully by the end of December. Is it okay? So let me just, for the sake of those watching, try to bring this document up. Okay, so this is the calendar. Question. So as I said, this is the core work. This is budgeting every position, determining fringe benefit rates, budgeting every box of paper, every pencil, all the way up to the large program initiatives. So even though, again, we're talking bigger picture, longer term change, this work will be happening in the background. Any questions I can answer at this time on the calendar?
This year. Just want to keep in mind that that's one thing that I like to improve upon is not waiting until October and we start engaging the council. And I think this process is going to help move that along. That's a small window of time to make big decisions.
Move forward.
Go to the next item, the 2023 budget review.
So I just wanted to give the members of this group some documents just to start your thought process. And 20 minutes is going to be difficult for me, but I will do my best to not go completely off the rails. I'm happy to talk about this for hours, so 20 minutes will be a challenge. The first document I gave you, and I'll follow along for those at home, is a kind of a next layer of the onion, if you will, of looking at our budget. So we have taken this document to break the budget down by fund and by department, and then by the next level in our budgetary structure, so that you can get a better sense for where the funds are allocated in a specific department. You can also see in the estimated revenue column whether they generate any revenue, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Then the net cost to the fund. So the net cost to our general revenues, as well as the staffing requirements for those functions. And a couple examples here I wanted to highlight is if we go to the Public Works section, which is on the second page of your printed document, we look at code enforcement. So we have a $14 million appropriation budget, but they bring in an estimated $14.6 million. So, you know, this context is important as we're looking at making budgetary decisions. If you have a self-funding activity, you know, maybe that's something you exempt from that review, or if you don't, you know, then you've got to look at changing the fees as well, so we don't get into any conflict with the Hancock Amendment. So this document goes through all four of the general funds, again, down to that programmatic detail level. Many of our departments are certainly capturing at an even finer level through our general ledger structure. So we'll be able to support this group as you have questions that come up and want to get further down into the details. For example, you see police patrol on this list, and we can get to details such as precinct or contract. You know, I think whatever the council's wish is, we'll see if we can get at that fine level of detail. The next document is just a couple of visuals I wanted to share with you. See if I can shake this down a bit. So this first pie, you know, we have really two main funds which are challenging from a budget basis, the general fund and the health fund. So here I've plotted out for you the general fund and the health fund, both by function at the top and then category of spending on the bottom. Really just to illustrate a few things for you. So if we look at the top, 67% or 2/3 of our budget is public safety. And of that, police alone is almost 50% of our entire budget. So that's followed by general government at 20%. And those are the functions we need to enable all of our other services. So things such as IT, Department of Administration, which contains a lot of the back office functions like personnel, purchasing, finance, as well as our Board of Elections that we're required to fund, and our debt service costs. So those are our fixed costs. Health and well-being is only 1% of the budget. And in this fund, it's only the Department of Human Services and the Public Administrator. And economic development and infrastructure is 12%. So that's Public Works, Economic Development Partnership, and our Department of Planning. If we look at the budget by category, the biggest chunk is 72% salaries and wages. So it's people cost. So if we're looking at making significant change to the budget, functional basis, public safety is going to have to be a part of that conversation because they're so dominant in terms of the dollars. And if we look at it from the category basis, it's got to involve people. So in my 15 years here, we've often had conversations around exempting areas of the budget from review. So I've heard comments in the past of, well, we'll look at this, but we'll exempt public safety. Or we'll look at this, but we'll exempt positions. And the point I just want to leave you with is that we can't cut services without impacting people. And the opposite is true as well. We can't cut people without impacting services. So just a little context to keep in the back of your head as we start to move forward. If we look at the health fund, their largest area of spending is medical services. Right? So it's corrections medicine and their clinics. Their categories of spending are a little different. They're lower in salaries and fringe because a lot of their activities are contracted out with hospitals or other health systems. So that's in the purchase services category. The piece I wanted to spend the most time with you on today is our financial plan, just to get a level set on where I think we are as we go into this conversation. And every time I give you an update to our financial plan, I'm going to give you two boxes, the last estimate and then the new estimate. And again, I will try to keep myself too far out of the weeds here, but I think this is critical just to understand where we're at. So we have to look at 2 years because we're still technically in the middle of 2022. And so I wanted to give you an update on where I think we are. And I'm going to focus on the bottom box here in the general revenue fund as we talk here. So starting from the top, we thought we did start the year with 124.4 million in our reserve. And that is the amount of money that has no claims against it. There's no encumbrances, no contracts. It's truly available to spend. Our estimated revenue was 307 million. And keep in mind, property tax is still coming in. So a big chunk of our revenue won't be known for another month or two. Our estimated spending, I have lowered from 344 million to 336 million. So that's an $8 million reduction in estimated spending. And that's being driven by two things. First, the Jamestown Mall project did not get spent out in 2022, so we'll carry that forward. And I see about $2 million in underspending from my previous estimate. So that's a good thing. This then leaves us with what I call a structural deficit. So measuring 2022 spending against 2022 revenue of 29.5 million, or almost 9%. Carrying down the sheet, we see transfers in of 35 million, and that represents money we took from ARPA, the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, for revenue replacement, so offsetting revenue losses due to the pandemic. This gives us an ending balance estimated at about 130 million, and expressed as a percent of revenue, that's how we express our reserve percentage, that's 42.3%. And we want that number to be greater than or equal to 10%. Is our baseline policy. So as I mentioned, we had some large appropriations made, some of them after we had our last formal financial plan. One was the 23.8 million for police matching funds. I mentioned Jamestown Mall already. So we will be coming to you soon for a reappropriation of those funds into the 2023 budget. You'll see those on the next page. But again, just a reminder, we won't have final information on 2022 spending until President's Day weekend, revenues until April, and the overall financial report isn't complete until June. So if we move forward to 2023, things I wanted to mention here. First, you'll notice on the far right, the NFL settlement fund now appears. And so we've set this up as a general fund, but a separate standalone general fund. So we will, those funds are available for general governmental purposes. So that's why we classify them as a general fund. But since they're not specifically dedicated to any programmatic activity, we've set those off separately. So in terms of where we are on our financial plan for 2023 as of today, we start the year with the same 130 million we talked about a moment ago. We're estimating $320 million of revenue and $382 million of spending. So that's $21 million higher than it was in my prior estimate. But that's due to the carry forward, as I mentioned, of the police matching funds and Jamestown, and at least $1 million in other reappropriations, the largest of which would be the comprehensive plan funding in the Department of Planning. So that leaves a $62 million structural deficit in that year, which actually looks worse than it is. I mentioned we have a number of one-time spending items, Jamestown, police, comprehensive plan. If we back those out, our deficit looks like it's around 32 million right now. So that's better than the number that was closer to 40 we've talked about previously. But it's also very, very early in the year. A lot can change. So if we just look at the deficit, setting the one-time costs aside, I think we're around 32 million. That's still a 9% deficit. That's going to be a tough number to deal with. But even if this happens, we still have a $67 million balance at the end of the year. It's 20% reserve. So that still is an adequate position to be in, but obviously we can't have deficits this large year after year. That's really the issue here. So the goal of this group is through spending reductions or revenue enhancements to drive that number down to zero. And I would argue go past that zero number because we've got to give ourselves room to absorb those cost increases that we know will continue. There will continue to be pressure from the police side on collective bargaining agreements. I think the non-police staff will continue to expect pay raises. We'll have growth in healthcare costs, retirement costs, and so on down the line. We also have the uncertainty of just general economic performance. I think the common thought seems to be a recession starting in the fourth quarter. And whether that looks like the late 2000s recession, I guess would remain to be seen. But so we've got all of these variables floating out there. So that's the goal, right? Just eliminate a $30 million deficit and give yourself room to grow. So that's the financial plan where it stands as of right now. My plan would be to, at the close of every month, bring you an update, not only on revenue performance and spending performance, what's happened, what's out of the ordinary, what's concerning or noteworthy, but also just to give you, we're updating this financial plan sometimes daily. So we'll check in with you each month through the working meetings to keep you up to date on where we stand, where we think we are. The last item that's just on the agenda, and we'll get into it in more of the working meetings, is this issue of across the board. So if we fail to take action on identifying service changes or revenue changes, the only lever I have left is an across the board reduction, which is using an extremely dull knife to cut the budget back. It would be extremely disruptive to all of our programs. So I think as one of our learning objectives in our group meetings, we can spend some time looking at what that might look like. So that's all I wanted to cover today. Obviously, we'll talk about what specific tasks we want to take in each of our working meetings. One of them we've talked about could be a deep dive on revenues, deep dive on financial plan or interrelation between funds, kind of setting that foundational level before we get into the department by department review. So I know that's a lot of information I've just thrown at you. Any specific questions I can address now? Are you happy to just go back and absorb?
So I'm definitely going to have this. Sure. But I think we should level set to say that this didn't happen overnight, right? These issues that we're faced with, even though we're all willing to take on hard, it didn't happen overnight. It's been decades in the making. And so, as I said earlier, that grace, because it's going to take time to work through this. We have three things we're doing simultaneously, as you mentioned, Paul, taking care of leftover from last year, mainly 22 spending, dealing with adjustments for 2023, and then planning for 2024 and beyond. And so all that has to happen simultaneously as we try to reimagine how we do budgeting in the council and how the council starts their process as soon as possible. So again, I don't know about anybody else, but it's daunting. You see it just laid out like. If I was at my house and I saw these numbers, I'd be like, so are we moving? Or how are we cutting our expenses? Because this is a lot. And so for us to even work through it, I think we need to digest where we currently stand, the truth of it. And not just numbers flashing, but this is where we are. Now how do we move forward? So yes, I have to digest. All that to say, yes, I have to digest. And it's gonna take some work.
Yeah, I would add to that, but to your point about an across the board cut, there is no silver bullet here. This is, to Councilwoman Webb's point, this has been years and years in the making, and we're not going to get our way out of it by, finding something obvious. So this is going to take work, it's going to take a lot of back and forth and give and take. And I would hope that, I said earlier, my goal at the end of this is to have a process in place that works going forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul, for that presentation. The next item on our business is to discuss data tools.
So let's just walk through here. This is called our open data site. This is on the county's webpage. So both council, county executive, and the general public can go on here and get insights into how the county is functioning, both financially and then also within personnel and workforce related questions as well. So specifically, you can see on here various different dashboards that we've got. We've been working to build this out over the last year and a half or so. I also wanted to point out a couple of specific ones that I think might be helpful in answering some of the questions that council has regarding vacancies specifically, and then also employee turnover. So this dashboard right here is on our staging site, so it's not yet live, but it will be going live after this meeting. What you're seeing here is various different visualizations showing the number of vacancies and the vacancy rates within departments across the county. So on the left, you can see these boxes. These are called tree maps. They're essentially like fancy pie charts. So the bigger, the darker the square, the more vacancies or the higher the vacancy rate. And so the top two are by specific departments, and the bottom two is by fund. And I should mention too, this is just the 4 general funds that you're seeing here. And then on the right here, you can see the current vacancy rate across the county. And then below that, you see these line graphs, which are vacancy rates over time in various different departments. So right now it's showing justice services in yellow and police in pink. But you can also select any number of departments that you want from this drop-down list here and subtract as needed. And then also potentially helpful is this drill down dashboard, which allows you to go one layer deeper into the location, which roughly correlates with divisions within departments. So you can see where vacancy rates are potentially lower or higher, both compared to these yellow bars, which are the department averages, and then the countywide average as well. Other dashboard that's potentially of interest is this turnover one. This is new for us, but what you're seeing on the top here is the employee turnover rate over time back to 2008 on the top. And on the bottom is essentially the same thing in line graph form, but this one is interesting, and that allows you to kind of back out or get more detailed so you can get down to the monthly level. I think it's just really interesting to see just the overall trend there. So you can break that down by department, by location, and then even job class. It's essentially the same visualizations in those.
When you said neither one of these dashboards are now been speak, so would there be live?
Right.
Start this week?
Yeah, we're working to make them live on our open data site.
talk back to this open data page, and you can see some of the other.
So
Yeah.
just like those dashboards, these would be those ones.
Yeah, and so this is a new tool we have called Tableau, and we're using this to visualize, to try to help people analyze and understand data. So as we were working together and we identified data points that would be useful, my team can go back and work on those dashboards so that we can get that ready and at your fingertips so you can go as deep as you'd like to in any specific activity.
Right, when you were showing the nutrition, I think we talk about vacancies a lot. What I always stumble on is that, say, let's cut the vacant positions. So we're not paying for those, so how does it help us, right? They're just vacant, we're not giving anyone a salary on it. So how does that benefit us if we cut those? We wasn't paying for them anyway, and I think people put a lot of stake in vacant positions, but it doesn't give us a bang for our buck. Sorry. But appreciative of these dashboards.
I just wanted to mention, in our financial plan, we make an allowance for the value of vacancy savings throughout the year. So we know that no matter what the economic conditions are, I can pretty much guarantee you we'll spend about 92% of our budget. And most of that savings comes from vacancy savings. So to your point, we've already factored that into our financial plan. Obviously, from an operational perspective, if you cut vacancies and you were unlucky enough to have a vacancy existing at that time, then theoretically that position is gone. We haven't actually done the work of analyzing the service to see whether it makes sense to, to continue that position. So that's again kind of that dull knife version of approaching the problem.
The only other potential expense, though, is that, so if you look at like justice services and police, the largest offenders, if you will, you have overtime costs. So justice services budget, what, 760,000 in overtime, they spent $1 million maybe at the end of this year. So that there's, you're trading permanent salary, potential savings for overtime expenditure.
There's something that we work with just those savings of not having to pay that overtime. Tease. Track.
So the next meeting will be February 8th. Get together on the time. And we'd be glad to hear your suggestions for agenda items either between now and then. Have anything you'd like to offer today? But in general, we'll first start to make sure we understand money's coming from, and a big overview of where it goes. And we'll start taking a deeper dive into it. Are there any requests for information, data, way we can present this material in a way that would make it understand?
So in all transparency, Dr. Page, how to digest this to start with before I know additional information that we will request. But we have some time between now and even the next working group meeting, and definitely before the next milestone meeting, to be able to work through some of that. But also, just like the public is watching, I'm sure our peers are watching, and so they may have some insight for us as well. So give us that grace so we can get that feedback and then forward it to your office. It works?
Yes, I think that's a good plan moving forward. We posted on the screen, those of you watching and following, an email address to send us questions. That's stlcobudget@stlewiscountymo.gov. Invite anyone watching to send us questions or ideas or any feedback for the continuing this conversation. Okay, all right. Thank you for coming out today.